And welcome back, Prepathon fans. So good to see you all here. Congrats again to our amazing contestant winners at this year's Cloudways Prepathon. I am so excited and honored to bring up our next guest. This is somebody who I've gotten an opportunity to have a couple of conversations with on previous Prepathons, on other Cloudways events, on our podcast over at the Digital Agency Show. He is a hero in the web and digital space. And I'm talking about Mr. Rand Fishkin. He's the CEO of SparkToro and author of Lost and Founder. He is a marketing expert with a passion for feminism, cooking, and helping people excel in marketing. And today, we're going to make this as interactive as we can because we've been talking about AI, we've been talking about innovation, we've been talking about growth. And so here we're going to be talking about AI and marketing, the other side of the story. Rand, welcome to the Prepathon.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brent. Good to be here.
So, Rand, I know that we all kind of drool over AI, and a lot of us have lost ourselves in all the AI rabbit holes. And one of the reasons I think we wanted to bring you into the conversation today is because you've had a little bit of a counterbalance position around AI and marketing, and maybe what it's doing to marketing, and maybe how it's affecting marketing or could affect marketing. And so, yeah, I'd just love for you to open up on this topic. And for our audience, if you have questions for Rand, let's start getting those in the chat. We're going to try to get as many questions answered today from Rand. But yeah, Rand, talk to us about this.
Sure. So I think my sense is that the marketing universe is actually becoming a little more sane and savvy over the last 3 or 4 months about the use of generative AI, large language models in marketing applications. And I don't mean to dissuade folks from intelligently applying specific use cases for whatever, ChatGPT or Bard or any of the many tools that rely on those into their processes, right? I have used those myself to, for example, classify large groups of data into particularly time-consuming categories that manually would have taken forever, and that whatever an Excel formula couldn't have done on its own. I have used it to help with some programming structure stuff. I think that those types of use cases are fine if you are preparing a big old, keyword report and you're like, hey, I want to break out all the terms and phrases that had this, particular aspect versus this one. Yeah, AI, generative AI, really good at that stuff. But I get enough emails and messages, especially I think the first half of this year, where people say, hey, I asked ChatGPT which marketing channels I should invest in. And they told me these ones, so we've been following that. That is not a use case where ChatGPT or any large language model should be applied. And my fear is that many people don't fundamentally understand how the large language model produces the text that it produces, right? They think it has answers similar to how, Google sort of instant answers gives you if you type in, how old is Tom Cruise? And they say, well, he's, I don't know, he is 61 or whatever it is, right? That they think that that's an answer. Oh, where should I do my orthodontist marketing? Oh, well, I don't know, radio ads are a very effective way to do marketing in the orthodontics field. And it sounds credible, right? The large language model is designed to make the text sound credible, convincing, compelling, professional, high quality, and reasonable. Usually when you get lists like this, what are some good keywords that I should target for people seeking orthodontics in the Seattle area, right? And it will give you a list of SEO keywords or paid search keywords that sounds reasonable, but sounds reasonable and is a good result, is a true answer to that question, are two different things. And if you don't understand how a large language model works, or you just assume that it's giving you good answers, you're going to be in a bad place. And unfortunately, I think a lot of marketers are getting really misled in this way, making assumptions about how it works, seeing people on stages, or, this, look, no offense, but there's a healthy number of, I'm going to call them like Twitter and LinkedIn tech bros, who sort of post these like 90-second videos, right? About, hey, you can just go to ChatGPT and get this. Put it, and it's kind of TikTok-y style. And so it speaks to a certain, like, I just want to get this task done really fast, and I don't want to have to learn all these things. And great, this is going to solve this problem for me. And that, dangerous. It's really dangerous. It's a bad idea to rely on that stuff. It's not giving you good answers. Sometimes randomly it might give you a good answer, and then you think you can trust it, and then the next time you get terrible results. So anyway, that's my general soapbox around this stuff, Brent. I'm not anti using it for tasks where it makes sense, but I am. I think it's very dangerous in sectors where you need a combination of data and metrics that ChatGPT cannot access, or you need real strategy and creativity as opposed to predict the next word that's most likely to come after this word. And that's what LLMs do.
And I think, Rand, I mean, you put a lot of emphasis on language model. And when I think about some of the use cases you just talked about, which was like business intelligence decisions, right? Like which businesses are making the most in what market and what channels are they using to reach those customers, is something that, I mean, first of all, most privately held businesses probably keep that information a little bit under wraps. So they're not even sharing it with an AI model to begin with. And you're just kind of getting this general list of recommendations versus something really specific.
I mean, what you're essentially getting is, the large language model has, similar to Google, right, kind of crawled a large corpus of text on the internet. A lot of Reddit threads, a lot of news postings from whatever, CNN and PBS and NPR, and all these sources of language. They've indexed books and textbooks and that kind of stuff. And then they have basically said, okay, I like using the example of that a lot of large language model, sort of training sets use, of the sky is, and then the large language model is looking to fill in that last word, right? So when you type something like, what color is the sky? The large language model is trained to look for words that are associated with sky and color and fill in that blank. And so it looks across its big data model and it's like, okay, you know what? 75% of the time when we see color and the sky, the answer is blue. So we're going to give the answer blue because that's the most likely thing that a human being, a credible human being from our corpus would put after that set of words. And that's the same thing it's doing when you say, which keywords should I target for my orthodontics business? Or what marketing channels are going to work to reach chemical engineers in the UK? It's just filling in text blanks based on percentile odds. It sounds really credible. It's very cool that it does this. And that use case can be awesome for a bunch of tactical stuff that you might do. Programming, right? When we did our big analysis of what people use ChatGPT for, programming is like 40% or something. And it is because ChatGPT is great at programming. Right? You tell it, hey, I want you to write me code in Java that does X. It will. That code will compile, right? And you can use it. Pretty sweet. Like, is it the most efficient? Maybe not. Do you have to, learn how to prompt engineer to get exactly what you're looking for? Absolutely. But can it save you some time? Yes, it can. But it's just unfortunate how, because of the credibility, because of how credible the answers sound that you get from these models, people apply it to far more problems than they should.
Yeah. I was like, one of the first things I had to do was like, write me a sales page. Like, we sell coaching and training at UGURUS. Like, hey, write me a sales page for a coaching program that does XYZ, right? And like, to your point, beautiful. One of the things that I see in there though is like, hey, your coach, our program does XYZ, right? It like literally lists out common features of like my type of product, which is really like scary. So I'm like, oh crap, people are getting like the recipe. But then you go a layer deep and you think, how would they know, like, in what volumes, right? And what how much of each type of ingredient is going to actually help somebody get a result. So for example, they'll say like, hey, you need to do coaching calls, you need to do training, you need to do this, right? And I can imagine that there's going to be all these people out there in my industry, and it's probably affecting every industry. Like I can almost imagine if I was a dental office and I said, you know, what should a dentist office focus their time on, right? It's going to give me like cleanings. It's going to, it's going to, and like imagine somebody
It
taking that
sounds really,
information
yeah,
and
it
launching a
sounds
business.
really credible because people who have published, here's what dental offices spend their time on in the corpus of text that's been indexed, match that. But it's not advice. It is merely repeating to you the most common next token, right, word or set of words that is found on the internet. And so if that's what you're looking for, great, fantastic. And if that's not what you're looking for, but you think that these are real answers or this is real advice, right? So, I think there's an interesting one in the comments right now. Nicole mentioned that, she used, I'm going to make an assumption about gender, but that she used Bard and ChatGPT to come up with a keynote talk structure, right? So essentially, you might say, hey, ChatGPT, like I'm giving a keynote presentation at this conference about, whatever, marketing or content or whatever. Write me an outline. And what ChatGPT will come up with is a talk structure outline that fits the format and that matches, sort of predicted tokens from its corpus in the past when people have talked about keynote marketing talks on the internet in the past. Often these words and phrases come in and ChatGPT will make that sound credible. Is it the worst way in the world to start a brainstorming process, sort of blank page brainstorming? No, that's fine, right? It's kind of like surfing the internet and collecting a bunch of like, okay, what have other people done? And then looking at all of those and aggregating them together. That's not the worst way to brainstorm. It's fine. I hope that you also innovate on top of that. I hope that you use your own good judgment to sort of refine and improve and make it more creative. It's not a terrible use case, right? I put it in the middle. A really good use case might be, hey, I've got a talk outline structure already in mind that I really like. Can you, ChatGPT, suggest some topics that may be missed, right, in this particular part of the talk? And what's great about a prompt like that is ChatGPT or Bard, or whatever you want to use, will suggest words and phrases that are commonly seen next to that topic that you might not have thought of. Oh my God, I was talking about PR and I totally forgot to mention comms. I should include some comms stuff in my talk, or I should at least mention it, have one slide about that. Great, right? It's sort of caught you on something. Like that's a great prompt use case. So look, I'm not I'm not anti-AI. I just think caution is warranted. Intelligent use of a tool is warranted. I get really scared when people apply any tool, AI or not, any tool that they don't understand how it fully functions, right? Like I'll give you an example. So Brent, I used to run a company called Moz, right? I started this company a long, long time ago. It was in SEO software. And we created this metric at Moz. I think we patented it. I was on the patent with a couple of software engineers there, called domain authority. Domain authority had lots of people criticizing it. I think it still does to this day. And lots of people who love it and use it for all sorts of things. When people used that metric and they did not understand what it meant, it frustrated the hell out of me. And I thought that was really poor marketing and just a terrible idea. And I got to tell you, so domain authority, for folks who might not know, I suspect a lot of you are in marketing, so you do know what it is, right? But Moz's domain authority was designed to predict if you were to take a piece of content and put it on this domain and that domain, the same exact piece, on which domain would it rank higher? All other things being equal, right? Same number of links, same number of mentions, same time on site, like every metric you can imagine is the same. Which domain would it rank higher on? Wikipedia versus SparkToro.com versus, I don't know, Moz.com, right? And it's like, oh, okay, well, Wikipedia is 95, and Moz was like an 80, and SparkToro was like a 50, right? So that same piece of content is much more likely to rank highly in Google if you put it on wikipedia.org than if you put it on SparkToro.com, and more likely on Moz than SparkToro. Fine, great, right? If that's how you're using that metric, wonderful. You understand the tool, you understand the logic behind it, you understand how it's calculated, great. And then there were people who were like, I will pay you $50 for a DA40 link and $500 for a DA80 link. Oh God.
Yeah.
And we were like, all of us at Moz were like, what the hell is going on out there? Why don't people use the thing the way it's meant? Okay. You know what? We at one point we had a conversation with so Russ Jones was the data scientist who was running Domain Authority, and sadly passed away a few years ago. But was just a wonderful, lovely, just the kindest and sweetest guy. And Russ and I had a conversation about, should we change Domain Authority to mean this other thing? Like, should we try and recalculate it in the way that some of these people are using it? We ended up deciding not to do that. But it's just this big frustration I have generally around tools. Like, know how your tools work, people. I don't feel like that's controversial. Like, it's
like maybe we need to have like a AI driver's license before we get into under the prompt, right? We have to like pass a test, like what this tool is, but I don't think that's the world that we live in, and I don't think they OpenAI would have had those kind of growth numbers had we had to actually know what
I
we were
don't love
using.
credentialism and gatekeeping. Like, those are not my favorite things. But I also understand why you got to pass the bar to be an attorney, right? Right. So, like, just act responsibly. Do your job. Don't ask ChatGPT to do things that a large language next token predictor would not be good at doing.
Rand, any thoughts on like? I mean, we had some. Adam Smith was on earlier, and he was sharing it with some ninja stuff on how to leverage generative AI to create content. So thinking about it for that real use case, like creating content using a language model to create content. What are your do you any predictions on, as more AI content is created without that nuance or experience or advice being at the core? Like, we're just blowing out content that might not have that expertise, at the back end. Like, I guess, how are our search engines, or how are people going to evolve if there's all this stuff out there that's like, it like seems accurate, but it's also not accurate, which you could probably say the same thing about lots of content on the internet. But like, any kind of predictions for how that's going to affect things on the internet long term?
Yeah. Well, so let's see. Predictions for how it's going to affect things on the internet long term. I have a little bit less of those. I mean, my guess is that the generative AIs themselves, who want to leverage these large language models and build them, are going to have to be more and more careful about what content they index. They'll have to get good at identifying output from LLMs, because if you start training an LLM on its own output, you get incredibly weird and terrible results, right? After just a few iterations. I think Brittany Muller, who's kind of like a AI data science specialist and guru, has shown a bunch of examples of this, where if you train a large language model on its own output, stuff gets insane and just useless, right? It becomes nonsense, gobbledygook. So my prediction there is lots of people will produce crap, right? Generative AI crap on the web. I would urge you not to be in that group. I think that it will not generally return the results you are looking for. There are use cases where I think it would be fine to generate a few paragraphs or even a page of content from an LLM. I'm thinking especially of, hey, I have this help content. It applies to this thing. Will you rewrite it for this other thing that's very similar? And then I'm going to edit it. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I think that's a fine use case, right? If you want to create something that's a little bit unique and it has this this purpose, you're not generally trying to rank in search engines for anything. it's designed for a human being to consume. It needs to sound good. It needs to be accurate. You're going to human edit it. Fine, go ahead. Right? Like it'll probably save you some time versus having, I don't know, like a low quality outsourced writing agency put it together for you. I'm fine with that. I don't think there's any problem. I would say if your goals include getting more email subscribers, right, to your newsletter, or getting your content shared on social media and amplified, or potentially having that content lead to a conference inviting you to speak about it, or ranking at the top of Google search, or any of these sort of having journalists reach out to you and want to cover the thing that you put together. Any of those use cases, large language model generated content cannot do three things that are critical to that. One, I have never seen a piece of generative AI content that is insightful, right? Like it recognized a pattern or uncovered something that had not been uncovered before that was creative and useful. Second, it's never novel. It cannot, fundamentally, LLM content cannot be novel because it is only predicting tokens based on what has previously been published. So if you have a hot take, right, or a counter narrative to the usual on something, or you have a particular new insight around a topic, that is a unique superpower that a human being can always do better than a large language model that's been trained on previous content. Maybe someday we'll get to a world where generative AI can start to predictively do it, but today that world does not exist. So I would urge you to use your human superpowers. And then the third thing is it can't be creative either, right? It can only do things that it's done before, and therefore sort of ideation that is, here's a fascinating allegory for something, or I'm going to relate this in this novel and insightful way to this other thing. LLMs can't do it. If you've ever tried to have a large language model write you a joke, it can sometimes be unintentionally funny, like, oh man, that's terrible. Gosh, that's kind of hilarious how terrible that is. But it can't write jokes to save its life. It cannot mimic human humor. I don't know why. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I think that humor is too many neurons, right? But it's kind of cool that we have, you can see prediction systems producing lots of content, and yet these fundamental things, right? Insightfulness, novelty, humor can't be injected by an LLM. And so that's where I think if you want more subscribers to your newsletter, people, sharing your content, journalists reaching out, people inviting you to events, you got to use the things that will make you stand out from the rest of those. And that's what those are.
It reminds me of the, I don't know if you're a fan of Casey Neistat, popular vlogger, kind of entrepreneur guy.
Yeah.
He did one of his vlogs, like he got a generative AI like script and kind of screenplay, right? Like, go here, do this, here's what you say. And he just like acted out the whole thing. And it was pretty boring. B, it was like there was things that were like clearly off tone, and he's got a lot of content out there for AI to consume. And it was just like some of the stuff just didn't really add up like 100%. You were like, this is really, really weird. It was like hold dog, kiss dog. Like he was like, anyways, it was pretty funny. But I think there's a lot of people out there like he's got a very big personality. He's got very specific values. When we see a Casey Neistat, it's like seeing a famous painting. You're like, that's a Casey Neistat. And when AI tries to create that, it doesn't just fall short. It's like his blog or his vlog, I'm sorry, would never have ranked even close to the many, many millions of subscribers that he has. And I think a lot of content creators are, and this is actually a question, would you recommend using, this is from Gerardo here, would you recommend using AI for content creation? And I think you've already touched on this a lot. But if you haven't watched Casey Neistat, like if you're trying to be an influencer, like maybe it's part of the creative process. It'd be like a friend you're bouncing ideas off of, but like at the end of the day, if you're putting your stamp of approval, at least this is what I'm hearing from you, Rand, is if you're putting your stamp on it, if you want to stand out, then maybe you should consider other tools to help you.
Here's what I'd say also, Brent. AI content is the floor, right? So everything you write and create, every piece of content you invest in had better be better than what an AI can produce by itself, because anyone can produce content, and a lot of it, with AI. And so if you can't do better than that, I would urge you to get out of the content creation and marketing business. I'm serious. That's not your strength, right? If an LLM can outperform what you can create, you're done. Pack it in, right? Go do something else with your, professional career and life, because that's you're never going to be cheaper. You're never going to be faster. Right? So what's your advantage if you're not better? That I would argue that if you're in a sector where LLM content can accomplish the goals that you need it to accomplish, go ahead and use it. But those sectors are vanishingly small, at least raw, right? With human curation, with editing on top of it. Yeah, maybe, right? Maybe you can apply some stuff. I would argue that where AI is fantastic for content creation is it lets you scale processes that were previously unscalable. For example, data analysis types of things. Like, I'm going to go into Google Sheets, and for 80 cents, I can classify 20,000 rows of data in interesting ways and then present a cool graph and talk about the results of that in a way that I could have never done before, because I would have had to hire somebody to go through those 20,000 rows and apply the categorization manually. And this cost me $1. Awesome, right? Like, what a great use of AI. But I'm just going to have it like spit out words after other words that it predicts.
Here's another question from, I'm grabbing a couple of questions. So if you all are hanging out with us and Rand and enjoying this conversation, get those questions into the Q&A panel. We definitely want to hear from you through this discussion. But and you've touched on this a little bit, Rand, but is using AI for SEO not a good idea or a good idea? I mean, I guess there's...
Generally, I would say pretty dangerous. It is not impossible, but it is very difficult to get pure AI content ranked. There was an example that one person shared, I think, on LinkedIn of I want to say it's like a funny animals video and content type of website where they were able to use primarily generative AI to get that site's content some rankings and actually some decent traffic. And my suspicion is I think for a hobby site where you're just trying to play around and see what it can do, yeah, go experiment, have fun, do whatever you want, right? Sort of like the people who used language generators in 2008 to build AdSense driven sites. And then they were like, oh, a couple of years later, Google banned all of them and kicked them all out, penalized, everything to hell. And it just didn't perform at all. Like, yeah, we're in the stage where you could try some stuff. It might work a little bit. You could potentially get some traffic from that. But, oh man, you want to, you want to try and get your core business or a client's business, if you're an agency or a consultant, performing well. I would steer clear of unhuman edited AI generated content. I think one of the, there are some exceptions to this rule. So for example, if you want to save yourself a lot of time, you could, and I don't recommend against this, right? You could point your whatever video camera or your audio device at your mouth, and you could speak extemporaneously on a topic that you have, knowledge of, and get the text recording of it, and tell a large language model to turn that into more professional content that's stripped of all the disfluencies, right? The uhs and ums and likes and those kinds of things. It's pretty good at that. This just a good way to save yourself some time. And potentially you can do that with interesting people, right? If you want to interview folks, turn that into content that more readily sits in text format. Yeah, totally works. No, I'm not saying that's bad. It's the raw generated stuff that I think is really dangerous.
Yeah, I think there was an example earlier of the fireworks store that used AI to write an article about fireworks, and it basically talked about how fireworks were really dangerous, and you probably should not buy them. And so maybe maybe not the best use of AI.
Yeah, because right, like that is what the corpus of text on the web says broadly about fireworks, and so of course that's what you're gonna right. It's next token prediction, and if you think you're getting something else, you're fooling yourself.
What about in terms of like replacing jobs in the marketing space, right? I mean, I know there's, whether it's like marketing related or even customer service related. I mean, I've seen a lot of people start going towards, AI driven chatbots to replace customer service or other elements where maybe there's more of a human interaction component traditionally. I mean, how have you seen those types of case studies? I mean, should people be worried about their jobs in those types of high touch or even low touch types of environments?
Yeah, so I think about this. I think about this very much like I think about the revolution when we went from um, typewriters and manual human drawn spreadsheets with sort of like calculators to Microsoft Word and Excel, right? So that change happened basically between like 1975 and 1985. Almost the entire modern economies moved from, hey, I do all my data analysis on manual spreadsheets that are sort of written and drawn out, and I do all my writing work on typewriters, to I do it all in a word processor. I do it all in an Excel, Microsoft Excel. And when that happened, you can look back and you can see tons of people saying, "Oh my God, there are tens of thousands of jobs that are going to be lost because of this." Right? Like white collar work in America is done. Right? It's going to be just a few people. Is that what happened?
Which I've seen those headlines already. Like white collar jobs are like are sweating out. The AI revolution is going to be different. It's going to take all of them.
I just don't see it. Right? The only thing I see is another tool in the toolbox that helps make some forms of sort of modern information work more efficient, more effective in some cases, more scalable. And I think what is almost certainly going to happen is that efficiency will be used by lots and lots of companies and businesses, business owners, managers, and teams and agencies, and all these people. It will be used to create better results. There'll be some worse results, but overall there'll be some better results for some types of things. We'll kind of navigate this path just as we did in these other revolutions. And as that happens, right, as that efficiency happens, there will be more work that requires knowledge of how to use and apply these tools to get the results that people are looking for from them, which is exactly what happened when Word and Excel came out, right? Then it was like, oh, okay, well, now we need to get better at typing and writing speed, and we need to get better at formatting inside of Word and all those kinds of things. But tons more people could be creators of that type of content. And editing was a million times easier and faster. And so editors' jobs changed substantially, and they were doing far less spell checking and far more looking for grammar and structure and storytelling prowess and all these other kinds of things. That's what's going to happen here too.
I assume you're using AI at some level at SparkToro, or there has to be some conversations. I mean, I imagine like when I first saw
product, you mean?
Yeah.
No, not even a little bit.
Yeah. I want to, because I mean, like when I first saw, I was like, I mean, I've used SparkToro a little bit. I mean, I'm a big fan of businesses, creating influence through through industry publications and influencers and experts. And, when I first went into ChatGPT and I was like, hey, pull me a list of all the top, digital agency podcasts. And it was like, like made it a table. And I was like, and I immediately thought of, I was like, SparkToro. I was like, oh man, like this is gangster. But you're not yet, or not thinking about it?
No, not thinking about it at all. This is a great use case where I've had some people write to me and be like, hey, SparkToro, I, type in something like chemical engineers in the UK, and SparkToro tells me the podcasts that they listen to and the YouTube channels that they subscribe to and the words and phrases they use to describe themselves. But ChatGPT will do that for me for free. How are you going to compete with that? And my response is, hey, if you want to rely on next token prediction to give you, your marketing source of influence, go for it. It's totally fine by me. Like I don't think your results are going to be awesome, right? Like what ChatGPT will do is it will look at all the other top lists from the, last few years of combined content on the web about this thing, and it will show you the ones that appear there the most. You could go to Google and get that too, right? Just scrape the top 50 and aggregate them and like, fine, all right, top podcast for X. That's not looking at, we went to whatever, 10,000 chemical engineers LinkedIn profiles, and then we looked at all the ones that are linked to, an Apple account or whatever, and then we looked at which podcasts they shared and linked to, and which ones they commented on, and which ones they follow, and we calculated, okay, 15% of chemical engineers in the UK follow this podcast. I'm not sure why we would take away the unique value that we provide, which is sort of like data-driven, provable results from an index, and just use a language prediction model that relies on a tokenized text system. It doesn't make sense, right? I think our customers are going to be people who always want that, like, prove it to me, prove that those 15%. Oh, you can prove it. Oh, that's cool. Okay. That's who I should be advertising with, or, be pitching.
I mean, if you even like, kind of like what you were saying earlier, like AI generated content's the floor. So if that's all you have time to do, like if you were just going to go to Google anyways and search top lists and you manually build a list, and that's good. But if I've got like $1 million to bet on a marketing campaign, I might be like, hey, I'm going to probably use the SparkToro data and information. I'm not going to be just like, yo, ChatGPT, what are you thinking for best channels, right? Like,
I always think about, with ChatGPT, I always think about, how do you know that? Right? Like, which I think is fair to ask of any tool, right? So if someone tells you, for example, whatever, these 4 YouTube channels are going to have the best ROI for your ad spend in Google. And, if Google recommends them to me in Google Ads, my brain immediately goes, whoa, why is Google recommending that? And part of that logic is like, well, Google is money motivated. They want me to spend the max, but also if I don't get return on my advertising, Google's going to lose my business long-term. So they do have an incentive to provide like good suggestions and recommendations. Granted, Google doesn't provide suggestions and recommendations anymore, which is a big part of why SparkToro exists. Google's essentially just like, no, just give us your money and we'll make sure that it goes to the right places, but it's all a black box. And they are probably doing some really smart things, but they're also going to make sure that you spend exactly the maximum budget, right? And get the minimum returns for you to keep spending with them. So I just want people to ask, how do you know? Like, how does ChatGPT know that those are the top podcasts for chemical engineers in the UK? And the answer is, I don't know anything, but I can predict words that come after other words with high processing credibility. Okay, so you're telling me you're a spicy autocomplete. That's not what I'm looking for, right? Like I just don't think spicy autocomplete is where you can bet even your non-paid marketing budget. I think that's a bad idea. So anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that just even thinking about that context of like investing, I mean, for some people, it's like investing their time and they might not value it in that same way. But if you start thinking about like, if I had $1 million to invest in this, I might start asking those questions of like, well, where did this data come from? I looked into it. I saw that at least with ChatGPT 3.5, like the crawling data, the data that fed the learning model was like 2 years old. It was like back from 2021. So again, you're looking at outdated information and you're using that for decisions you're trying to make today in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, I think even the ones that are using the most up-to-date data, right? So that there's some where like the data can be as fresh as a week ago or whatever. Even in those cases, the fundamental problem is that the corpus of data overall is not transparent to you. So you cannot say to the large language model, show me the documents from which you predicted that these words would come after these words, because I want to verify that I trust those sources. And because that's a black box, I am really skeptical that you're going to get great results, at least consistently. This is, I think, this is the biggest problem. I think this is why these large language models can often mislead people into using them, is that on occasion, I have gone to ChatGPT and I've run a search similar to SparkToro and been like, hey, who are the most popular social accounts in the science fiction book writing field? And the list doesn't look that dissimilar to SparkToro's list. And I'm like, wow, gosh, ChatGPT is so smart. And then I go and run another query and it's nothing like that at all. But because sometimes it produces very credible results, you get sort of, you can get a little lazy, right? About saying like, oh, well, I can probably rely on it for this other thing. But then when you have to prove it, it just, the value disappears for me, right? Because it will not show you its work.
This question's from Nicole. She calls you rank, which I don't know, maybe from your SEO days. Cool. Slight misspelling there, but we'll forgive Nicole. How can agency owners build their personal influence? Are there more opportunities now where a lot of content is AI boring? So like, yeah, is there a way for us to like find a seam with all the AI content that's coming out right now?
Interesting. I mean, I think that it is, I think that unfortunately, I wish this were the case, Nicole. I wish you were right. And that, this sort of AI revolution has meant that a bunch of content creators have just, started outsourcing it. But I think in fact, that's not what's happening. When I look out there at the field, and this is why I keep saying AI is the floor. When I look out there at the field of who's earning subscribers, who's earning attention, who's earning amplification, who's sort of getting big in any given space, it's not AI content creators. It really isn't. And, it's people who have unique voices. It's people who can insert humor and cleverness and thoughtfulness and novelty and insight into their work, written or videoed or otherwise. So I think, unfortunately, it has not produced a place where there's more opportunity than there was before, because so many people are relying on this laziness. But yeah, I would say if you're an agency owner and you're trying to stand out in what is unfortunately a very crowded field, it is fantastic to pick a niche, a hyper specific niche, especially in agency world, because if you get associated with solving this one problem better than anyone else solves it, I think you can do remarkable things. That's a great way to stand out. This is my favorite agency website. I know this is slightly off topic, but I really love what Joanna Wiebe did with Boxcar. Is it cool? I can put it in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
we can pull it up if we want
to. Yeah, boxcar.agency. What I absolutely love about what Joanna and her team did with this site, and she's told me it has performed quite well. It doesn't get a ton of traffic, obviously, but it really drills into this one thing that very, very few agencies and consultants help with, that can drive lots and lots of, look at that. Recover the lost revenue sitting in your CRM. Not an agency pitch that many agencies make, hyper-specific focus. And if you scroll down, it tells you how they do it, who it's for, who it's not for, and what the results will be, right? We only do this one thing, just around email marketing for companies of this particular size. Here are the results that it got. I think if you scroll down further, they actually have a you should only contact us if, there you go. You see that 1, 2, 3, right? Series A, B, or C, over 10 million in annual revenue, or less than 10 million, but you're turning 2.5 a year in profit. That's it. That's the only people who are right for this particular product and agency. That focus is a superpower, right? And so my advice around, especially for agencies, is to think about hyper niche focus, solving a painful problem that not a ton of people have, but when they have it, they need someone who does that exact thing. I think this is why, Brent, and I would say for a lot of people here, I'm sure you've seen a bunch of agency owners that I know have been shutting down their agencies, laying people off, getting smaller, because that hyper boom that we had kind of post-COVID, that all the tech companies, everybody was going online, everybody was like ramping up their use of agencies and consultants, all this kind of stuff. That boom kind of ended. And so now you're seeing the fallout from that. And I think this hyper niche focus thing is, quite frankly, the solution for people who want to find a long-term play that's going to work. Granted, you got to pick the right niche, but if you do, oh man, there's nothing like being known as the person who solves this one problem. Oh, you have this particular thing, you should go talk to this person. And that's really hard to do in a big generic field, right? What I did in SEO in 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I don't think you can do that today, right? That field is too crowded. There's too many people who are the go-to person in SEO. There's hundreds of them. You can't be that, but in new thing, you can be.
I think it might be hard to see who's using it best. And I love seeing, those types of agencies, because you think, could I have asked ChatGPT hey, what's a good value proposition for an agency? And it would, I don't know, maybe it gets the creative brainstorming process started. But earlier you mentioned that, think of it as a tool in your belt. And I think the best content creators are likely using AI at some level to automate processes, to spend more time doing the things that are going to really make them stand out. They're not using it for a hack to lazy produce content. They're using it to take the boring stuff, make it super efficient, and then bring that real unique edge to their content. I mean, I don't know if a lot of in our audience have kids or whatever, but I see these amazing creators out there on YouTube, and I can tell they're creating very original content. They're creating stuff that's monetized, it's doing really well. They're creating brands and comic books and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sure AI is doing something in there, but it's not the main thing. It's maybe they're using it as some kind of innovation tool in the business, but it's not like they're reading a script that was written from AI.
Absolutely not. So I think that, this is kind of the risk, right? Is if you ask it strategy and tactics questions, if you use it raw to generate content, you're going to have a bad time. If you use it for programming assistance and to clean up some of your code, if you use it to do data analysis, if you use it to brainstorm some ideas that you wouldn't have thought of, or find some missing gaps in a piece of content or a presentation, that's all wonderful stuff, right? I think that can be great, and that is using the tool in the way that aligns with how it's built and the data sources that it pulls from. And I would say there's probably a ton of unexecuted opportunity to get great at making a process that was previously quite difficult more scalable, more functional, more effective, faster, even potentially higher quality using these AI tools. Some of the hyper specific ones, some of the big broad ones too. It's just it's in these hyper niche applications that it makes where it really makes sense, as opposed to I'm gonna I'm gonna get rid of whatever my content creators and use it there. I also think we are entering an era where the bias to how do I apply this tool rather than how do I solve the most important problems in my business is dangerous. Like it's a bad way to think. I realize that anytime there's something new and exciting, there's always opportunity, and there will be some people who benefit from just like deep diving on ChatGPT or Bard or whatever. But rather than saying, hey, a new tool came out, how can I apply that to my business? I would urge you to instead think, what are the most important problems that I can solve in my business? Are there any tools you're aware of that can help solve those in better ways? Are they actually the most important ones? That's where I'd put your prioritization.
I was working with an agency the other day, and they pretty much their client came in and said, we need to use AI. And they pulled up the client's website. It was atrocious. There was no funnels. There was no basic keyword optimization. Like there was like nothing there. Like they had no focus on traffic. They had no focus on marketing. And here the CEO is like, I don't care how you do it. You got to use AI. And he was like, well, why don't we just start with some of the fundamentals? Like let's solve those core problems first. And then maybe we can do some like fun, shiny stuff. And I think a lot of folks are, doing it the opposite way.
Do you remember like 11, 12 years ago, right? The Apple App Store was just getting popular. Google's Play Store had gotten popular. And all these businesses were like, I need to build an app. How do we build an app? We're a local coffee shop. We need our own app. You do? And then 5 years ago, they were all like, should we issue NFTs? And look, AI is absolutely more useful for a larger group of people than those two technologies were. But I see a lot of the same hype cycle mistake making present in the conversations around AI that I see in those. So if you didn't have success building a mobile app for your business 12 years ago, and you didn't have success issuing NFTs and creating your own cryptocurrency and putting your business into the blockchain 5 years ago, maybe think a little differently about how to apply AI to your business today.
Those are very wise words. Out of curiosity, have you gotten some, you put some counter voice out into the internet, which I think is amazing, but have you gotten some people that have not been super happy with your position, or have you gotten some hate mail or hate tweets?
I think the biggest, I would say the biggest pushback we got was this on this piece, which I'll put in here, right? We did this big study with Datos, who's Extreme Data Provider, right, of thousands and thousands of ChatGPT sessions. So we looked at sort of all the prompts that people entered, and then we classified those and categorized them and analyzed them. I actually used ChatGPT inside Google Sheets to do a lot of the classification, which was super handy. And for this, where we analyze these sessions, we did get a lot of, I would say, pushback around our findings that were not based in data, but just in people's feelings, right? Like, I feel like in my life, ChatGPT is getting bigger, therefore your results must be wrong, as opposed to like, oh, we looked at, I have this other traffic data source for openai.com or whatever it is. I think just after this report, SimilarWeb also published a sort of graph of OpenAI's traffic showing a very similar slump post, I think it was post April or May, that the traffic starts going down. But the other thing that was really interesting from here is like we talked about what are the real common user tasks, like what are people are trying to do inside of ChatGPT. I did not try in this piece to be prescriptive about what I thought was a good use case or a bad one, but I do think there's some really, really interesting findings from here, right? So you can see like what are common words that people put in their prompts. I think my favorite one, if you scroll down a little bit, I think
I just want to call out to fun is in the top 4 words. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Can you make this fun? Can you make this exciting? People are going to their AI chatbot to have fun, ask for dates.
I
I
mean,
don't know, right?
like there's a surprising amount of use for tabletop role-playing games. You see that at the bottom there? Look at that, like a full, oh no, where you were before. Just a little further down. Dungeons and Dragons is mentioned in a fifth of a percent, right? Of all, like,
wow,
lots of people doing, having fun inside their ChatGPT thing. I don't know, like write me a puzzle for my D&D players or whatever it is,
yeah.
that kind of stuff. I think those are fine, right? Those are fine use cases. I get a little nervous. So I went through a lot of the prompts manually, right? So I think I sort of human looked at like 8,000 prompts, and I would say, Brent, 8 or 9 out of 10 of them, I was like, this is a reasonable use case, right? I wasn't like worried. 1 out of 10, I would say I was really worried. Like, oh, that's not good. Like, that's not good at all. And then maybe like 1 out of 10 was that's not something you should be doing with a large language model. I don't think you understand how this tool works. So I don't know. I think my least favorite example was, will you list reasons why the Nazis were right, kind of thing? And I was like, no,
Wow.
don't. That's not. I mean, maybe this is someone who's like planning to argue against these points, and so they're coming up with the arguments. But I got the sense it was written in quite a racist, or I guess in this case, anti-Semitic way, and I was like, oh gosh, But ChatGPT, it doesn't recognize that stuff, so it's not gonna give you particular results. But it was fascinating to see the outside of the programming use cases, which are really, really standard stuff. Fascinating to see some of the marketing ones, like a lot of people using it for analytics, which I think is a really smart use case. So they would do things like plug in, their whatever traffic and conversions and Hey, can you predict what next quarter of next year will look like based on my last 4 quarters? Actually, a great use, super smart use case, right? Like, because ChatGPT can do math quite well, and nice. I like that. I think that's great.
Well, definitely. I mean, I think if I take anything from the last couple of days, right, it's a tool. It's going to be used for a lot of different purposes, and I think time will tell how it's going to benefit all of us. And I know we're coming up on time here, Rand. Just want to give you a huge shout out for being
there was
here.
one thing that Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, sorry. It looks like there was a little bit of a delay there on our connection, so I don't know if you had some lag there. So apologies about that. You said there was one thing, not to leave our audience super hanging on that.
Yeah. I was going to mention one thing. I just did put together this, which I think in anticipation of this event, I thought that this might be an important question that would come up, and so I figured we should chat about it. I won't have time to get all the way into it here, but I'm going to share the link for folks. I just did like a quick video and explainer about how a future where search works, which I know a lot of people are scared about, right? With search generative experience and the labs function that you can play with inside of Google right now. Is that going to take away everyone's traffic? What does that mean for how Google, gives answers, all that kind of stuff? So I tried to answer those things in there and talk about, what's going to be important for marketers who are trying to future-proof their marketing, especially their search marketing, in an AI-driven world.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing the article. Real quick, before I let you go, Rand, and I want to just thank you again for being here. How was your experience this year at the Prepathon?
Oh, just lovely. Yeah, thank you for having me, Brent. It's been great.
Well, we always love your insights here on the Cloudways team. Thanks again, Rand, for hanging out with us. This has been fantastic. I think your perspective is hugely valuable. Seeing lots of love in chat. Really appreciate you being with us and hanging out with us at this year's Prepathon. So thanks again. Up next,
You bet.
I know we have a very special guest for us. We're going to be jumping into our after party here in just a moment, but I just want to give everyone here another thank you for participating with us at this year's Prepathon. We've had such amazing speakers, such amazing engagement. You all have been amazing, and we're not done yet. We have one little extra special surprise for you. We got Matt Kazam joining us here shortly, and we're going to do some bonus after hours networking. So if you haven't had a chance yet to use the networking feature, we're going to be coming back after Matt's session, giving us an opportunity to connect with some other folks on this session. And I will be jumping into some of those networking rooms, and maybe some of the other speakers will be jumping back with us as well. So when I come back, we're going to have Matt Kazam for some after hours comedy on business and tech. And I don't know, hopefully he doesn't roast me. We'll see. We'll see. All right. We'll be right back with you with Matt Kazam.